Welcome back to another episode of 5 Fact Friday, where we share 5 fun facts about a specific whiskey or wine topic and hopefully going to learn something. If you're new here, I'm Sam. This is Whiskey and Wine. Let's go. So today we are going to be talking about one of the biggest distilleries in really bourbon lore, bourbon history, current events, whatever you want to say. And if you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, we're talking about Buffalo Trace. Now, Buffalo Trace gets an interesting rep depending on who you're talking to. Some people really hate Buffalo Trace because they're like, they just release all of these limited release products. It's impossible to find. It's all marked up. It's all secondary. There's other people who think that Buffalo Trace is just like the best thing, that it's quintessential Kentucky bourbon, that's the best thing since sliced bread, and everyone should try it. Now, I wouldn't put myself in either one of those camps. I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I have Buffalo Trace product. So I got the E.H. Taylor, we got Elmer Teely, we've got regular Buffalo Trace, we've got Weller, we've got a lot of stuff here. But I'm also not going to be a person who just goes out and looks for it and really tries to get it, because that's just a lot more work than I'm willing to put in. So with all that, we're going to dive into 5 facts about their history that kind of shaped the whiskey world that we know and love today. And we're also going to dive into just some of their practices that are kind of interesting and what makes them a good company. First up, let's talk about their popularity and notability, because they are obviously very notable. Most people will see Buffalo Trace and go, yes, I know Buffalo Trace. I know this product. It's good. Let me have that. And that goes for newbie whiskey drinkers to people who don't even drink whiskey. Buffalo Trace is the name that they know. But what makes them really interesting is that they can produce a lot of different products with 4 main mash bills. So they have a high rye, they have a low rye, then they have their wheated mash bill, and they have their rye mash bill. Running with those, you get a lot of different products. And if you find one of those mash bills that you really like, or one of those grain recipes that you really like, there's a lot of other options out there that you can try that are just going to be similar, but obviously different, and different usually in a good way. One of the really interesting things I like about Buffalo Trace and what makes them so notable is that just with their 4 main mash bills, so they have their high rye, low rye, wheated, and rye. If you find one of those mash bills that you like, there's a lot of other options in there as well. And with all of those, especially for someone who doesn't drink a lot of whiskey, they're going to be completely different to you. Yes, now a seasoned whiskey drinker, whiskey nerd is going to be like, yeah, no, I can tell this is all Buffalo Trace. But for someone who's not in that world, they all do taste pretty different, and different in a good way. Jumping into all of these differences and all these different offerings, let's just run down all of these products that they have, because it is insane. And no, I'm not going to be able to do it, so cheat sheet. So, Buffalo Trace, lots of options. They have a lot of really good stuff. Let's run through it. There's obviously regular Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, the BTAC or Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, which is just heavily sought after, a lot of older age-stated stuff. They have their Prohibition collection, their Experimental collection, their Single Oak Project. They have the E.H. Taylors, the Van Winkles, the George T. Staggs, the Sazerac Rye, Blanton Single Barrels, rest of all, like the Blanton stuff, Elmer T. Lee, Weller, Traveler Whiskey, Old Charter, Benchmark, and Ancient Age. That's a lot to be producing from 4 mash bills. To be able to do that and do it well is amazing. But with all of those options, it means there's something for everyone, regardless if you're someone who likes ryes, if you're someone who just likes a sweeter bourbon. There are some really good options within the Buffalo Trace profile. I meant to say portfolio, not profile. Anyways, now we're going to jump into what I find to be some really cool advancements that Buffalo Trace historically made. So the first one we're going to be talking about is from someone that you guys all know, E.H. Taylor. If you're into Buffalo Trace, you're into whiskey. E.H. Taylor, it's the guys in these nice little canisters over here. But we're talking about the man E.H. Taylor, or Colonel E.H. Taylor. Don't really care too much about what he was doing while he was at the distillery, but afterwards, when he was one of the governors of Kentucky, he helped with a really important legislation that went through. This is going to be the Bottle and Bond Act. Now, if you don't know what the Bottle and Bond Act is, it essentially made a standard for making whiskey. Before, around this time, people were just making some really, really bad whiskey, and people were getting sick from it. And the people who were still making good whiskey were losing money, essentially, because no one wanted to spend the money on their product when all of these other products were getting people sick. So, Bottle and Bond Act comes into play. Basically, it means that the whiskey has to be stored in a government-bonded warehouse, which back then it was you had 2 people with the keys. It was the distiller and then one government person to the warehouse, so that you wouldn't have any weird things going on. Has to be aged for at least 4 years, has to be exactly 100 proof, and oh gosh, why am I missing the other thing? Has to be made from one distilling season. Goodness. But follow those rules, you can put the bottle and bond label on your whiskey. Now, you have that, people are going to be able to trust that. We can thank E.H. Taylor for pushing that and making it so that we have good whiskey and that whiskey didn't just randomly die off in America. The next important person we're going to be talking about is Elmer T. Lee. Now, Elmer T. Lee is a little more interesting because he didn't just come in and own the distillery and do a ton of stuff like we saw with E.H. Taylor, ended up going to George T. Stagg. But when he came in as a maintenance engineer and slowly started working his way up the ranks. As he's doing this and just working, he's working underneath an Albert Blanton. Yes, the namesake for Blanton's bourbon, but not actually the person who named it. Looking at Elmer T. Lee, right before he retired, he ended up basically paying homage back to Blanton, his predecessor and his teacher, and remembering that he said something really interesting about how there are specific honey barrels, or these really good barrels just out there in the rick house that you're gonna find, and it's just interesting. It just kind of happens sometimes because of where it is, how the season was, how the light hit it that year, all these different things. With that, he's like, this is really cool, I'm gonna make this into a product, and that's where we get Blanton's whiskey from. So he took these really good single barrels and started bottling them. So now we have our first evolution of the single barrel, or not evolution, iteration of single barrel. This is a big thing in the whiskey world. For a lot of whiskey nerds, especially right now, they're not really hunting all of the really cool things that are out there. A lot of people are looking for really good single barrels. And that's from a wide range of distilleries that do single barrel picks. Last thing we're going to talk about when it comes to Buffalo Trace is their limited releases. Now, say what you want about limited releases. You can say you hate them, you can say you love them, but they do serve a purpose. And that purpose is to drive up excitement and get people looking for them and just have this fun idea, fun air about it. And they do that very well. Every time Buffalo Trace releases a new limited release, or when they just do their standard limited, when they just do their standard limited release once per year with whatever it is, the excitement is high to try to find those bottles. Or if it's once a quarter, the excitement is really high to find those bottles. And it gets people out there, it gets them spending their money. The other really cool thing is when this started to happen, there were people who weren't interested in whiskey that are like, this is interesting, what's going on here? I'm gonna go jump into that. Now, if you look at just like the past 20 years, and let's just take Blanton's for example, you could walk into a store and you could find Blanton's pretty easily, or so I'm told. I wasn't even 21 yet. But then last couple years, last 10 years maybe, it got really hard to find. Actually, probably more like last 5 years, it got really hard to find Blanton's. And now you're starting to see it a little bit more commonly out there. Say what you want. It was doing really good, and then it basically did really well for Buffalo Trace, but a lot of people had their attention on Buffalo Trace and on these products. And it did bring more people into the world of bourbon. Now, there were the people who were already in it that were more annoyed. My biggest thing is bourbon is a social experience. It's fun to talk to people about whiskey. It's fun to just share stories about whiskey and talk about what your favorite one is, why it's your favorite, some cool experiences. It is a fun social thing. So the more people we can bring into the world of whiskey, the better. Hey, if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you, and I'd really appreciate it if you can just leave comments, tell me what you thought, tell me your favorite Buffalo Trace offering. And if you like this video, obviously leave a like. I appreciate that too. And if you really liked it, subscription would mean even more. You guys have made it to the weekend. I hope you have a good one. Cheers. I'll see you on Monday.